Digital inequality has been an area of interest to me, probably because of the environment that I grew up in. My dad worked as what I can only describe as a self-employed professional hacker. He used to be able to be employed by clients to be able to fix, rebuild, or repurpose whatever a client asked for. And from that, we found that we grew up in a very Wallace and Gromit style house, in the sense of nothing in our house was ever really broken, just repurposed in another way. It's the kind of place you can imagine a light switch being part of a recycled toaster. But me and my siblings often found ourselves ahead of the curve when it came to digital skills in school. But in my area of youth work, I've come across a lot of young people that have been really affected by digital inequality and seen the adverse effects of digital implication. Digital inequality is how we refer to the social and economic inequality that in regards access to, use of, or impact of digital technologies. One way we can look at this issue is to imagine a road with many toll gates, and at the end of that road is being digitally literate. Now, a toll gate is a barrier that stops people moving forward, and things like access to technology or the ability to use technology stops people early on in this toll gate. Those people who have been stuck early on are now falling further and further behind those who are at the front. Every time the power of the web increases and it's possible to do more things online, the gap between those who are digitally literate and those who aren't widens. These new forms of inequalities can, of course, combine with existing inequalities and do something worse by creating them onto a digital setting as well. As a nation renowned for being at the forefront of technological development, in the city where the founder of the web, Sir Tim Berners-Lee, was born, what possible digital inequality could we have? Well, it's reckoned that about 19.2 million households are now hooked up to the web. This is a good thing, that's always rising. But only 26% of those on the lowest incomes. And in the same breath, they reckon that it's about 16 million people in this country lack basic online skills. So, I saw this brilliant Google ad the other day, and it says, knowledge is always within reach. And it's not always within reach, and it's got the not crossed out. Well, that might be true if you've always got the Google app. But to have the Google app, you then have to have access to the internet. You have to have a smartphone to be able to use it, and also the education about how a smartphone works. So knowledge is always within reach if you have access to all of those things. It might be for everyone, but that doesn't mean everyone has the opportunity to use it. I was at a talk where Lord Chris Holmes said something that really struck a chord with me, which is, how do we psychologically prepare a generation to take their place in the digital economy? And that really got me thinking. The principles of changing our beliefs based on what's happening in the world is nothing new. The world goes through this change all the time. And technology has always driven a shift in change of beliefs and perceptions. So, let's rewind to the pre-industrialized era, where about 80% of jobs were all industrialized based, and they were agricultural and involved a lot of hard work to be able to move forward. In these progressions, they were very labor-intensive, and it would take many years to be able to become established at what you were doing. But once you did, you'd have a career for life. The process of product development was long and arduous, and these things took lots of time to be able to create until factories came along. And this brought about the growth of industrialization. There were many dark sides to this growth, like long working hours and poor social conditions when working. Not good things, we don't like those. But there was also a lot of social gains as well. The well-being of people increased. The price of products decreased, resulting in enhanced quality of living. It produced new jobs and, for a short while, a rise in the employment rate. But, in my opinion, the con of the industrialized revolution is happening again in the digital revolution. As technology takes the place of human place in the workplace, it results in an unemployment rate rising for those who lack competencies and skills. Now, I'm not a Luddite by any stretch of the imagination. You'll probably find that out a little bit later on. But I don't think the development of technology is a bad thing per se, but it does change the shape of the economy, and it does cause disruption. Disruption isn't the goal. Change is the goal. Disruption is often just a byproduct of change. But we need to start to think about the human implications of this change. To see the extent of de-skilling, one only needs to go to a supermarket and look at self-service checkout, or look at the automation of blue-collar worker jobs through things like 3D printing, or, in the not-too-distant future, self-driving cars. For someone who can't drive, I'm really looking forward to that one. These are just a few ways that we can see technology eroding the human element needed to operate machinery. And these skills and trades are all in the process of having production slowly moved away from people and slowly beginning to change the shape of the job market as they do it. So if we can visualize the job market in the industrialized era, it would look something like this kind of chest of drawers kind of shape. You'd have your low paid, you'd have your high pay, and you'd have your middle paid. The middle section would contain jobs like bookkeeping, clerical work, and these would provide typically middle class pay. But this is the section in the information age that has become increasingly automated. And it creates a shape that looks more like an I shape, where the middle class paid jobs are beginning to move into the lower class paid jobs, which are things like restaurant workers, health home aides, customer service facing roles, which are really quite difficult to automate. It's expected that actually around 35% of jobs that we currently know at the moment are going to be automated within the next 20 years. Economic theory and government policy will have to be rethought if technology is indeed destroying jobs faster than it's creating new ones. This is where I think we need to evaluate what kind of future we're building, as the digital economy might look very different to any model that we currently know. If that is the case, it's dangerous to the development of a generation to be imparting values like a high standard of living is purely the result of intelligence and hard work, when that's not necessarily true, and debatably if it ever was. I would like to stress the value of digital skills and their importance in the job market. According to a study by Telefonica at the end of 2013, it's estimated that we're going to need 750,000 digitally skilled workers by 2017. And for not being able to make that, it will cost the UK economy $2 billion a year. Also, 27% of all job growth in London is generated by the digital and tech sector. I believe as we prepare young people for the digital economy, we need to have a far more humanistic approach. Growing up surrounded by technology, my dad would always spend a lot of time teaching me how to problem solve and where to look basically to be able to find answers for myself. My mother, on the other hand, was very spiritual, and she used to say a lot of things about the fair treatment of people. When I was 15, I really had the rug pulled out from under my feet. I began to have tonic-clonic seizures, sometimes up to several times a day, multiple times a week. Had a huge impact on my education. I developed a real pick-and-mix of mental health issues, problems such as anxiety, depressive states, post-traumatic stress, often resulting in panic attacks. My self-esteem was destroyed, and I felt like my identity was robbed from me, partly because I couldn't identify how I was going to take my place in the world. I started to display challenging behavior at school. I was really struggling to retain information in class, so I used some of my technical savvy to try and compensate, but often my efforts were a little bit misguided. I'd do things like break into the teacher's laptop to be able to download the answers to tests. I'd create short executable files on memory stick and disguise them as my homework, and then I'd stick them into the computer and try to convince my teacher that they'd accidentally deleted my homework when the computer crashed. And when all else failed, emergency plan A was I hacked the school network and gave remote access to the whole of the sixth form so they could control all the computers around the school, and that meant that they were bringing up inappropriate web links on everyone's computers while they were trying to do the lesson. I put a lot of effort into my self-preservation at the time, and the extent of my illness but eventually the extent of my illness really caught up with me. I was really in a position that I could no longer keep up appearances for anyone. After finding out the extent of my exploits, one of my teachers told me with my attitude I'd never amount to anything. I dropped out of school with near enough no qualifications to my name. After 3 years of frequent fits and seizures, I was eventually in a position that I was able to stabilize. I spent a lot of evenings then self-teaching myself what I missed out on in school, and was able to actually secure a job at the local cinema. But after being there for a few years, I wanted to try and explore employment avenues, but it was really difficult for someone with no qualifications or experience to break into the job market, especially in an area that I found meaningful. It was during this time that I came across the Prince's Trust Team Programme. The Prince's Trust are a charity that helps support young people who have been disadvantaged into employment, education and training. The programme helped me immensely with my self-confidence and self-esteem, beyond anything that I could possibly comprehend. But most importantly, it helped me to showcase my digital skills to employers. Since my seizures have stopped, I've gone on to work on lots of projects. A few of note include giving written and verbal evidence in select committees, researcher for an independent film. I worked on the digital designs of an ITV documentary, and I worked with the UK Space Agency on a project for a Mars rover. I currently work for the Prince's Trust on the Get Started programme, where I support other young people who are in a similar position to the one that I was in the same way that I was supported. Among other factors, having a high level of digital literacy and a knack for problem solving gave me the opportunity to overcome my disadvantage and break into the job market. It's what we like to envision technology as doing, enabling a generation using technology as an equalizer to get the opportunities that they wouldn't have had otherwise. But having worked in the youth sector, I've gained a lot of exposure to those who are adversely affected by digital inequality. Digital inequality, in many senses, stems from the fact that our economic system hasn't kept up with our technological capabilities. In my opinion, I think we've negated the human cost of aggressive digital expansion in this country, predominantly because we're trying to impart industrialized social values on a generation growing up in the digital era. The problem is, we don't know what the future is going to look like. We can't predict the kind of jobs that are going to be available. We don't know the kind of economy that's going to shape our society. But what we fundamentally do know is we do know part of the human experience is we're always going to encounter challenges. Everyone in this room, I'm sure, at some point has encountered a challenge. I'd be very surprised if you hadn't. But what we need to be able to know is that these challenges will require resilience to be able to overcome them. We know that the ability to solve problems is essential in developing both coping mechanisms to mental health and also for being able to gain digital skills. We know young people are experiencing higher levels of unemployment, higher levels of mental health issues, increasing dissatisfaction with their own well-being, problems integrating with society, and also becoming more disengaged as they try to get into the economy. The Equality and Human Rights Commission published a paper this October that said young people have experienced the biggest slide in income and employment and face higher barriers than 5 years ago. In the 2015 Prince's Trust Youth Index, 36% of young people said they feel inadequate on a daily basis. That rose to over 53% of those who weren't in employment, education and training, and leaped again to 70% if that had been the case for over 6 months. I think they're really shocking statistics when you think about young people in this country at the moment, 70% of those not in employment, education and training feeling inadequate. This year, young people scored the lowest in the index's 7 years history when they said when it came to things like emotional and physical well-being of themselves. We need to start looking at how we're going to drive a shift in principles and beliefs for the digital revolution. We need to prepare young people to take their place in the digital economy. And here's where I suggest we start. In a day and age where we have a greater understanding of the human mind than ever before, the most valuable asset that we can pass on is coping mechanisms to be able to deal with challenges in this period of digital disruption. What is at the heart of developing digital skills is the ability to problem solve. What I want to see is more compassion and understanding for those who need support. Why can't we adopt the mindset that a high standard of living is not the result of an individual's hard work and intelligence, but that of a group, but that contribution of everyone, because ultimately we are all interconnected. There's a brilliant African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. At the end of the day, without somebody giving us a helping hand, where would any of us be? I definitely wouldn't be standing here if it wasn't for the compassion and consideration of others. Personally, I don't think anyone can say they made it alone. We are interdependent beings in an interdependent society, and that needs to be reflected in the values that we're imparting to a generation. We must help everyone to not feel isolated in a digital world. No matter the revolution, the most valuable resource has been and always will be that of human potential. Thank you very much.